Hello and welcome to Sage's Tabletop Table Talks. I'm Sage, this is my tabletop, and I'm going to talk to you about tabletop role-playing games. Due to the PSA I recorded last week, I haven't done one of these in a while. I've also just been kind of not really... I'm sorry, bumping the table. I haven't really been having a lot of inspiration for what to do in one of these videos lately. Luckily, I had a friend of mine, ZJ is his name, but he gave me a suggestion of a topic that might be kind of fun to play around with. And that is designing a one-piece tabletop role-playing game. So one of the things about so I'm going to kind of do in 3 steps here. There was a tabletop role-playing game, a D20 based one, that I read a long time ago. That was a one-piece one that was just very, very poorly done. And I'm going to explain the problems they made and like what to do about them. Sorry. Anyway. And then I'm going to kind of kick around some ideas of how I would do a one-piece TTRPG. And then I'm actually going to bring up a game system I think would make a perfect one-piece TTRPG. But since I'm not really in the habit of doing game hacks, of, you know, taking a preordained game system and kind of like trying to hack it to make it fit something, I would rather design a game from the ground up, mostly just because I kind of enjoy that process of kind of looking at a game, looking at like basically a bunch of pieces on the table, of like lore and ideas, and kind of trying to put something together that fits that world. Anyway, so yeah, sorry, but that, I think I enjoy that process. So in the next couple weeks, I might try to slap together a real quick and dirty rough outline for a one-piece TTRPG, and then I'll probably do a table talks about it here in a month or so, once I got something down that kind of I think feels like One Piece. And one of the things I kind of talk about when it comes to things like this is a lot of like these ideas of system hacks and taking systems and trying to make them fit IPs. Like taking like the D20 system and trying to retrofit it into Star Wars or Gamma World, and it doesn't really work because the D&D system, the D20 system, very much is designed with a certain concept of mind, which is high fantasy action, kind of high fantasy, you know, adventure. They are an adventure game. There's a reason why there's been almost no good books in Dungeons and Dragons that have been about social encounters. The game is just not built for that. I think that's kind of a huge idea when it comes to designing a game, is that concepts are not universal. Dragon Ball Z and, let's say, Prince of Tennis don't have very similar feels because they're very different. And those are both considered shonen anime. I just can't think of any shoujo or like bishonen, I think they're called, anime off the top of my head, because when it comes to anime, I just predominantly like shonen anime. You know, I like the Dragon Ball Z's and the My Hero Academias. But, you know, you could take something like Hikaru no Go and DBZ, and they have very, like I said, even within shonen, they have very different feels, very different themes, very different engagements. You know, Prince of Go is very cerebral, or not Prince of Go, Hikaru no Go is very cerebral, where Dragon Ball Z isn't. Dragon Ball Z is about big angry karate guys trading punches. And there's nothing wrong with either of those, but when you're building something, those are very different things. You know, something like Conan the Barbarian and A Song of Fire and Ice, they're both medieval fantasy, but they're not the same. Somebody who's a fan of Song of Ice and Fire probably wouldn't like how campy and over the top and kind of macho Conan is. And people who are fans of Conan probably won't like how plotting and political and like serious A Song of Fire and Ice are, because despite both of them involving people with swords in a medieval setting, they're not the same thing. So to design A Song of Fire and Ice TTRPG, you're going to be looking at something different than designing a Conan TTRPG. Conan TTRPGs are going to have a lot of focus on traveling great distances, meeting strange encounters, facing strange monsters. It's going to have a lot of things where dudes are bapping each other with swords, whereas A Song of Ice and Fire, you're going to want the mechanics to have a much stronger focus on things like courtly politics and deception and, very... I'm trying to think of the word. Like, the characters in A Song of Ice and Fire are all kind of scummy because to survive that world, you kind of just have to be a little scummy. Whereas characters in Conan the Barbarian, I know a lot of people have certain ideas of Conan, but if you really get into like the actual Conan the Barbarian, Conan is kind of a jovial, good-natured individual. Yeah, he has some drive of revenge and some drive of things like that, but he, generally speaking, is a good-natured man. A guy like Conan would probably not do very well in the world of A Song of Fire and Ice, A Song of Ice and Fire, and I cannot remember the name of it, mostly because I'm just not a fan of Game of Thrones. I'm not a fan of crapstick worlds with black and black morality. That's just not what I particularly engage in. I'd much rather read Conan the Barbarian than I would the works of J.R.R. Martin. Also, he's a GURPS fan, and GURPS fans are weird. People who like GURPS tend to be creepy. But anyway, I digress. So, one of these days I'm going to get an angry letter from Steve Jackson. I like Toon, Steve Jackson. I think Toon is good. Your other shit, not so much, but hey, to each their own, except for GURPS. Anyway, so with that being said, a long time, because I've been a One Piece fan for a long time. I read the mangas. And I was reading them when they were like being freshly translated, about to the 2-year time skip. I kind of just I stopped reading the manga at that point, and mostly just out of time. I had just graduated college. I was doing I kind of on the road a lot. I had a lot of other things I just really wasn't into. And I don't want to say I wasn't into. It was becoming difficult for me to keep up with the manga. And so I fell out of it. I've recently come back into it. I've started rewatching the TV show, the anime. Just because I'm going to give it... I stopped reading not long after the 2-year time skip, and I've watched up. They are about to go to Skypiea, where I'm at now. So I understand there's a shit ton of things that I am not familiar with yet. But I think I have a good idea of what One Piece is at its core, which is a grand adventure of people with strange powers, with impossible dreams that they will very, very likely be able to achieve, because One Piece, despite having some darkness, does tend to be hopeful, and it's a story about action, and it's also a story about friendship, because Luffy just makes friends out of people. He decides somebody's going to be his friend, and they're his friend now, and that's all there is to it. And even people he hasn't decided end up helping him, like the octopus guy from Arlong Park, from the Arlong Pirates. Just is like, hey guys, I'm your friend, remember that now. And so, but when I was kind of really into One Piece, I had a friend, we played Big Eyes Small Mouth, and he ran a One Piece game. And it didn't work real well. And it's mostly, I think it was the 6th edition of Big Eyes Small Mouth we played. I don't remember what edition it was. I don't even remember the book. I have no idea where my book is. It's probably at my mom's house somewhere. Because I had it back when I lived with her. I don't think it ever got to the house I'm in now. Whatever. We used that edition of Big Eye Small Mouth. Might have just been the 4th edition, honestly. Whatever. We used an edition of Big Eye Small Mouth. And the problem with that edition of Big Eye Small Mouth is it just was very unbalanced. It was... I wanted to make a character whose devil fruit power was he could shrink and grow objects by touching them. And doing so, just the ability to like make a cannon small burned up so many of my character points. And then, but like a guy who just is really good with a sword could just completely outclass me because he just picked a more efficient power set than mine. But I found a D20 One Piece game, and I don't think D20 is the right way to go. D20 is very rigid and very confined on how to build things. Like, for example, you know, building, you can't build Gandalf in D20. Like, you really can't play Lord of the Rings in a D20 system. Because the moment somebody plays a wizard, their powers go completely off the scale. You know, playing like a hobbit who's kind of a thiefy kind of character. I love my hair does a slow spiral. Anyway, just thieves are so fucking strong in D20 systems, especially like 3rd edition on. Thieves are so powerful. You really can't build a Frodo or a Bilbo Baggins. You just can't do it. You can't really build a Gandalf. You can't. I mean, Gimli's and a Legolas as you can kind of build. Guess maybe an Aragorn, like if you're, but nah, see, Aragorn actually kicked ass and Rangers suck in D&D. But that's kind of the thing, is it's like D&D tells D&D stories, like D20 tells D20 stories, because every design is very rigidly built into place. Like even in 5th edition, with the archetypes, if you're playing a warlock, you're playing a very specific concept. You are someone who has made a deal with an extra planar power, and you get this list of abilities with no variance. You can play around with this concept some. Like, I desperately want to play a barbarian who isn't angry, and I want to reflavor his rages as like more like a battle trance than like actual fury. But the fact of the matter is, I'm still playing a character whose design is he snaps into a battle mode, he gains a boost to his abilities, he gains hyper competency while fighting, and then loses that hyper competency when he's not in combat mode. And at the heart, because this was when 3rd edition was... The Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition was big. I saw the D20 version of the One Piece game. And the problem is, the game let you build the Straw Hat Pirates. So I remember one class which was most egregious about it, but to kind of go on, there was a class called the Brawler. Well, what did the Brawler do? Well, the Brawler gained a bunch of attacks that let him do extra damage with his attacks. He was able to resist certain types of damage. He was able to eventually gain the ability to draw arms hockey into his attacks. And you just built a Luffy. Like, that's all you were if you were a brawler. The martial artist class let you do unarmed attacks too, but it did things like with the unarmed attacks, like you did unarmed attacks and you do so with such speed that you do fire damage because the air is igniting around. Like, you're building a Sanji. And the most egregious one was the Gadgeteer. And every level the Gadgeteer, like at level 1, you got the ability to have a ranged weapon. And at level 2, you got trick shots to ranged weapon, like exploding bullets or, blinding bullets, smoke bullets. At level 3, you got a pair of goggles that give you far vision and increase the range increment of your thing. At level 4, you gained a grappling hook. Every level was just an invention that Usopp made. Like, all you could do was beat Usopp, and in the order that Usopp gained his abilities. And it's like, you can't build a pirate crew. You can only build the Straw Hat pirate crew. And that's just really disappointing because the world of One Piece is so insane and rife with these insane concepts. The game, because of the nature of D20, you have to lay everything out on a line. At level 1, you get this. At level 2, you get this. At level 3, you get this. At level 4, you get this. At level 5, you get this. And you can really... It's a very structured game. And you can reflavor things however you want. But at the heart, the Gadgeteer was a character who had ranged weapons he could use to do various effects, and he had a handful of other gadgets, like a grappling hook, or like, man, I don't remember what else. They got pop greens. It was one of their later abilities, like level 12. They got the ability to fire pop greens, I think. I don't know. But yeah, but that's just it. Is like, okay, and that's the problem is, if I'm playing a One Piece game, if I'm playing a game modeled after One Piece, I don't just want to play the Straw Hat Pirates. I want to have my own pirate crew and have their own adventure. And I want to... The other problem was the Devil Fruits. How Devil Fruits was at a level you could pick. I actually think you had to take it at level 1, which, yeah, works the way the show handles it. But it's super weird that you can't just eat a Devil Fruit later on. But if you took a feat, you gained Devil Fruit powers. And then what it did was, basically what it said was, you and the DM decide how the Devil Fruit feats work. And I'm like, oh. Because putting Devil Fruits in a D20 game is a nightmarish task. The game designers just didn't want to do it and told the players to do that work for them. And the game sucked. It just sucked. To the people who put the hard work into the game, I hope you guys use this as a learning experience, as a way to practice your craft, and I hope you guys moved on to do better design work. I think that's one of the things about being harsh on certain art, whether it's movies, books, TV shows, games. I hate this idea that you can't be harsh on a creative work because somebody did it and you blah blah, you haven't done it. But the problem is, I think personal attacks, like if I were to call the people who made this game, idiots who didn't know what they were doing and should be, drug out in the street and shot, that's not helpful. That's not good. I think that there's a time to call a creator on bad creative work. I'm not even going to call it because it's Fatal's an easy target, but there's a guy who designed a game called something like Racial Holy War, and it is just white supremacist bullshit. This guy who built a game that's meant to encourage players to reinforce white supremacist ideas, you're a piece of shit. You shouldn't be designing games. You should fucking go in your little fucking corner, shut the fuck up, and stop polluting the rest of society. the people who designed the One Piece game, as bad as it is, as really unplayable as it was, because we were gonna play it, we just couldn't because we just felt like it wasn't very good. You put something into the world, you tried your best. I hope you learned from your experience. It wasn't good, but everyone's first piece of art isn't good. I hope that you guys are out here designing games for maybe not PBTA. Hope you guys are out here designing books for Fate and Chaosium and all these things, because you put some work in and you fucking did it. And good job, guys. And I don't mean that sarcastically. Legitimately, you tried. And it's hard. I hate being critical, but at the same time, you have to be critical because toxic positivity isn't good for people. Just because somebody puts some work into something doesn't mean the work is good. And it's okay to say the work is bad. Like, I explained what the problem was that you couldn't build anything but the Straw Hat Pirates. And if you wanted to be a Devil Fruit user, you had to put a bunch of work into the game that you wouldn't have had to do if you just wanted to play a Zora or a Nami or an Usopp. So how would I go about designing a One Piece TTRPG? I would absolutely take inspiration from Super's games, because at its heart, One Piece is kind of a super story with a pirate theme to it. The characters, oh, that's so fucking cool. The truck, I didn't realize you can see the truck drive by the house. And there it is. And my door. This points toward the road, the street. The truck was cool with its lights. Anyway, still my optics, stay on topic, which has never happened on this channel. The things I would take from, I would grant players the ability to kind of design their own power sets. Zoro kind of has his own power set. He's a swordsman, but he doesn't just hit things with the sword. He does ranged attacks. He can split the molecules in steel to cut steel. Luffy, is immune to lightning. He's immune to, and not immune, but highly resistant to lightning and bludgeoning attacks because he's rubber. Zoro and Luffy are about on the same power level because that's just the way the stories work. Luffy, you would give a Luffy character or an Ace character or whatever, maybe a little bit extra points, or no, I wouldn't even do that. I would kind of just do the actually, you know what? I really like how, as much as I'm not a fan of Hero System, I actually really like how Hero System handles disadvantages, where as a player, if you're building a 400-point character, you just have 100 points or 70, whatever it is. You have so many points of disadvantages. So if I'm built, so I would rein those numbers in. That's the problem with the Hero System. It's just kind of everywhere. There's just a big pile of shit to deal with. Maybe like build a 100-point character, like 6 or 7 stats, and just be like, okay, you have to have 3 weaknesses. And Zoro's weakness might, okay, Zoro has a weakness of his, pride. Maybe he would have a weakness of his injury proneness because he always seems to be injured. Things like that. And Luffy, Chopper, Brooke, and what the fuck is her name? Robin. You would just give them one weakness you would take would just be Devil Fruit. What's the Devil Fruit weakness? You lose your power to Sea Stone, and you become basically unfunctional in anything more than waist deep water. Boom, build in weakness right there for a player who just kind of wants to build a more simple character with more simple powers. But like somebody who wants to build like a Sanji, obviously one of Sanji's weaknesses would be being a Lothario, where he just is like constantly any pretty woman, he just immediately is weak for. Especially Robin and Nami, which during Baroque's arcs, Mr. 2 took advantage of for a while, using the ability to change his appearance to look like Nami. And every time he did, he would distract Sanji, causing Sanji to hesitate his attacks. So, like, you know, Sanji doesn't need a devil fruit for a weakness. He has his own weakness. I also kind of like how certain games, like, despite the issues I have with it, the White Wolf games, where it's like, okay, you have so many points to put into attributes, so many to put into skills, so many to put into powers. And I think I would kind of copy that, because I think a big problem with a lot of games that just dump 1,000 points into your lap and tell you to figure the shit out, it can get kind of choice paralysis-y. Do I focus on skills? Do I focus on powers? Do I focus on stats? What do I do? Although MechWarrior and Shadowrun have like a priority system. It's like, what do you want to be predominantly skilled? Okay, A skills, you get 40 points in skills. And attributes, you know, are you A ranked in attribute? If so, you get 15 attribute points. Or do you rank B and put your A in skills? And if you rank B, instead of 15 attribute points, you get 12 attribute points, or whatever it is. Something like that might be a good thing to do in a One Piece game too, because, you know, a character like Nami is much more skill-oriented. A character like Luffy or Zoro are much more combat-oriented. And a character like Usopp is a lot more like trick-oriented. Like, Luffy and Zoro, especially early on, would definitely be attribute-based. They'd be like, okay, what attributes let me do the most damage and take the most damage? Whereas a character like Usopp would probably have a lot more focus on powers, because he has those trick shots. Luffy maybe had to have a little more points in, and he probably would absolutely put, as he leveled up, put more points into powers, because, you know, he kind of gets weirder and weirder, where Zoro and Sanji mostly just kind of get stronger and stronger. But yeah, so that's kind of what I'm gonna play around with this idea in the next couple weeks, because I think it's kind of a cool thought experiment. But now let me tell you what system out there I would use to play a One Piece tabletop role-playing game, and that is Fate. One of the things I really like about Fate is when you take a hit, you don't just eat hit point damage. You start to lose aspects. So you have aspects. Like, so for example, if I'm building a Luffy, aspects would be ate the gum fruit. So what does this do? This lets me do tricks when I'm trying to do rubbery things. Like, okay, one of the things that might let me do is, okay, I'm going to activate this aspect to stretch out and pull myself, to, you know, reach out, scrap, and then snap myself forward to launch myself somewhere. Or maybe if somebody hits me with a bludgeoning attack, I could be like, well, I'm going to use my devil fruit power, the fact that I'm a devil fruit user, to help. Absolutely, if we were playing Fate, or he's fighting Enryu, the lightning fruit user, it would absolutely be like, actually I'm going to activate my devil fruit power to give myself extra resistance to his lightning attacks. And that is absolutely like a very Fate thing to do. But also, when you get hurt, you eat damage to aspects. So, for example, it might be a thing where, okay, you lose a fight to Smoker. Well, Smoker puts you in sea stone handcuffs, so you no longer have access to your devil fruit powers, and one of his attributes will be, I'm going to be king of the pirates, which is like, okay, what does this mean? Well, this means that my character can activate it anytime, like, let's strive to be king of the pirates. But like after suffering a major loss to like Blackbeard, maybe that gets damaged because all of a sudden now your Luffy character is demoralized. Maybe he's like, maybe I can't be king of the pirates. Maybe this isn't something that is a reasonable goal for me to have. And of course, you'll heal those attributes, You'll have to take a scene to let, your first mate be like, I only followed you because you said you were going to be the best. And that's not this man who's second guessing himself. This isn't my captain. This isn't the captain I followed. You're going to snap out of this and we're going to go up there and you're going to get your revenge on Blackbeard and be like, yeah, you're right. I am going to be the king of the pirates, and something like that. An example of that would be in Arlong Park, where Nami, I'm going to make a map of the world. Well, when Arlong destroyed her, took away her berries, be like, oh, well, maybe I can't. Or that one might be different. That one might be her desire to buy her village back from Arlong. That would be one of her tropes. Would be like, one of her aspects would be like, I'll earn enough berries to take my island back. And of course, when Arlong basically had the Marines come in and take all of her money, she loses that. And once Luffy beat Arlong, that aspect's gone and was replaced by a new one of like, maybe just, I'm going to live a life of luxury that I never had the chance to live. And that would be the next aspect that she would have, instead of, because she no longer needs to buy her island back from Arlong. Sorry, I keep bumping the table. I'm kind of fidgety. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so I'm still kind of like... Anyway. So, like, and honestly, I kind of want to get together with some of my friends and take Fate and do a One Piece game. And I might actually suggest that to my gaming group. We've been kind of like, a lot is going on and we haven't been able to play in person, but we are on Discord now and we are trying to start a game up, and there's still a lot going on. But I might suggest letting me run a One Piece themed Fate game to my friends. And running a One Piece game might actually help me with my Let's design of throwing together a real quick, dirty, simple One Piece game. But anyway, yep. So that's me talking about just a common topic that just comes up on this show, which is designing a game, designing a system for the game you want to build, and not just a generic system, and not retrofitting a pre-existing system that isn't for what your game to what it is. And then kind of like talking about how I would go about designing and not designing a One Piece game. But anyway, have fun. I will see you guys next time. Hopefully I've got one of, I think next week I'm doing a World's Worst Wrestling with Fox. Hopefully our schedules don't get fucked up. And I might see if he wants to do a Table Talks with me then. If not, we'll just do a World's Worst Wrestling. I'll see you guys next time I do one of these. Or next time I do a Daily Dumb Question of the Day. Or whatever the fuck I decide to do. But anyway, I will see you guys. Have fun. And once again, you guys out there happen to catch on that you designed the D20 One Piece game. I said my memory's not perfect, so some of the things could be wrong. But if you guys are out there watching this, there's no hard feelings, and the spark was there. And I hope you turn that spark into a roaring flame, because I want artists to succeed unless they're bigots. Anyway, that's all. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.